I mentioned previously that we have biases that prevent us from seeing the truth to this story. But we don't just have a preferential bias for white girls as victims. We also have a preferential bias against seeing white mothers as criminals. There will always be those that will never believe that Mia is an abusive mother, no matter the facts. Why? Because we have a stereotype of criminals, and a white mother is the furthest from that stereotype. We simply don't think of white mothers as criminals or as unfit mothers. Let's look at some examples. Black children are overrepresented in the child welfare system. Studies in New Jersey and Texas have shown that black women are considered unfit mothers at a rate of 4 times that of a white mother, even when we take into account income and drug use. Black parents also get put on a list for infractions that prevent them from getting their children back. This includes having a dirty house or hitting their kid with a hairbrush. Recall that Mia Farrow beat Sun Yi with a hairbrush. Today, we also routinely separate immigrant children from their mothers at our borders. Even after President Trump reversed the child separation policy, we continue to separate children from their mothers. It's a fact that black and immigrant mothers lose their children for much lesser abuses than Mia is being accused of. And when it happens, we get told it's for the public good, that they deserve it. But this isn't a recent phenomenon. We have these attitudes because it's always been core to being American. The only reason America is shaped the way it is today, from sea to shining sea, is because we routinely took black children away from their mothers. After the Louisiana Purchase, there was simply too much land and not enough people to work them, so separating black children from their mothers became even more routine, so we could use their labor to work our plantations and fund our expansion. It wasn't considered a crime, and it wasn't considered inhumane. In fact, black mothers weren't allowed to cry as it was happening. They were punished for shedding tears because white Americans thought love is an elevated emotion that blacks were incapable of. Black motherhood was destroyed to expand the American empire and achieve our manifest destiny. We weren't much kinder to Native Americans either. Not only did we destroy their way of life, we took Native children away from their homes to westernize them, and we placed them in white homes. Today, women have made great strides in narrowing the wage gap. We think of a successful mother as a woman with a career and children, but child-rearing duties didn't shift to men for better or worse. They shifted to women of color, immigrants who fill the ranks of nannies and babysitters. These are undocumented workers who are easy to take advantage of. If we thought motherhood was such a noble pursuit, why do we outsource it? And why do we pay so little for it? And if we thought immigrants were capable of taking care of our children, why do we take away their children at our borders? In America, motherhood is not a noble pursuit that we cherish. It's simply a problem to be solved for. It's a business. Not only do we outsource child rearing, Americans are also having less children than ever before. The fact is, as much as we praise motherhood, we are doing less and less of it. Yet today, we still say being a mother is the toughest job in the world. We still like to bandy endless quotes about the beauty of motherhood. My point is not to take down motherhood. My point is that this generous attitude only applies to some mothers. The reality is, we built our country on destroying motherhood, and we still continue to do so in our child welfare system and at our borders. The difference in the motherhood we praise versus the motherhood we destroy is the color of the mother. And that attitude may have blinded us to Mia's abuses. Consider this. If Mia was black, she would have been called the derogatory term welfare queen, as many black mothers were, for adopting so many children. CPS would monitor her home. She also would have had her children taken away for her abuses, and she likely would have been investigated for the death of Tam to make sure she wasn't a risk to her remaining children. But I don't think this is unique to America. It's a fact that in Western societies, we have a preferential bias for white mothers over mothers of color in our attitudes and our actions. But perhaps you're not convinced by child welfare statistics, by what's happening at our borders, or by American history. Perhaps you prefer an anecdote. I'll give you the worst one. After the horrific London bombings on July 7, 2005, which killed 70 and injured over 700 people, British media focused on the wife of one of the bombers. Why? Because she was a white mother. Images circulated of her with her child. She was brought under police protection. The Sun paid her £30,000 for her story. They published a sympathetic view of her. She was just as repulsed as the rest of us by the bombings. She couldn't possibly believe her husband was responsible for these attacks. She played the role of a naive wife and loving mother. In the article, she says, "I just hope people understand that I had nothing to do with this. We are victims too." It worked. People felt sorry for her. She was exonerated both in the public and in the justice system. They let her go despite the fact that she had known connections to Mohammed Sadiq Khan, the ringleader of the London bombers. If she was brown, No tabloid would pay her £30,000 for her story. If they did write about her, she certainly wouldn't have been given a sympathetic view in the press. She would have been painted as an enabler of the worst UK bombing since World War II. She likely would have been put on a watch list and monitored. It would be a mistake. She would disappear, leave the UK, and go on to kill 3 people in a bombing attack at a popular bar in Mombasa, and is now a known member of Al-Shabaab. Is it possible that we just don't want to think of white mothers as criminals, especially ones that are media savvy? Yes, it's possible. And the people who pay the price for our lack of objectivity are their victims. Now, my intention is not to compare Mia's abuses with Samantha Luthwaite's crimes. That would be hyperbole. My point was to demonstrate our bias for white mothers. However, some people will remain unconvinced that Mia is abusive or that Dylan was coached. You may think that Mia's behavior in creating false allegations of sexual abuse is simply too hard to believe, that a mother would never do such a thing. Sadly, you'd be wrong. Creating false allegations of child sexual abuse actually was very common in the 80s and 90s.